Picture the harsh, incredibly windswept Mongolian steppe, right around the year 1162. A woman named Halun is holding her newborn son, and she notices something strange, really strange, clenched in his tiny fist. According to the secret history of the Mongols, it was a dark clot of blood, solid and deliberate, as if the infant had arrived already gripping the world. Now, people immediately whispered that this child was marked by destiny, but as we know, a dramatic birth legend doesn't just automatically hand you an empire.
So that leaves us with a pretty staggering question. How exactly did this child, an outcast nomad, a kid who was literally abandoned by his own clan, grow up to forge the largest contiguous land empire in human history? It's a massive paradox, one that historians have grappled with for centuries.
Well, welcome to today's Explainer, the Mongol systems beyond the barbarian myth. Today, we're moving right past that tired, one-dimensional trope of the mindless, savage conqueror. Because the reality is, the Mongol expansion wasn't just some chaotic horde blindly washing over the map. It was actually a highly organized, rapidly adaptable machine, completely driven by unprecedented military and administrative systems.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering from outcast to emperor, the military machine, administration and communication, Pax Mongolica and trade, and finally, the enduring global legacy.
Starting off with Section 1, From Outcast to Emperor, The Rise of Temujin. Before this guy was a world conqueror, you have to remember he was just a survivor. Cast aside by his tribe to die in extreme poverty, those early tragedies really shaped him. They taught him the absolute value of loyalty, and, frankly, the necessity of sheer ruthlessness.
So born in 1162, Temujin spends his early life just navigating this fractured, chaotic tribal warfare. But he had this absolute genius for alliance building. By 1190, he's getting these brilliant outsiders to join his ranks, guys like Subutai, a non-Mongol from the forest tribes who would end up becoming his greatest general. This whole talent cultivation project culminated in the year 1206. Tribal leaders gathered at this huge assembly called a Kurultai. They raised a standard of 9 white yak tails and officially gave Temujin his new title, Genghis Khan, the supreme and universal ruler. And just like that, the Mongol Empire was officially born.
All right, moving to Section 2, the military machine, mobility and merit. To make this empire work, Genghis Khan made a totally revolutionary break from tradition. He completely ignored noble birth. Instead, he promoted his officers based strictly on their actual skill. He organized his armies into units of 1,000, forging a true, ruthless meritocracy of military prowess. To really understand how effective this was, just notice the stark difference in logistics. While European armies of the time were chained to these slow-moving, heavy baggage trains and fixed supply depots, the Mongol military was entirely self-sufficient. They relied on rotational grazing for their massive herds of horses, which meant they could move rapidly across the terrain, carrying what they needed and just living off the land. This meant they could execute a campaign across thousands of miles faster than any enemy could even comprehend what was happening.
And on the battlefield, this tactical genius was devastatingly effective, especially with something called the Nurge tactic. Adapted from their traditional communal hunting techniques, the Mongols would execute a highly coordinated, feigned retreat. They would literally pretend to flee in panic, which drew the opposing army right out of their safe defensive positions and into open ground. Once the enemy was all stretched out and vulnerable, the Mongol cavalry would wheel around in this incredibly rapid, disciplined encirclement. Generals like Subutai used this to repeatedly annihilate opposing forces. Those enemies mistakenly thought they were winning right up until the exact second the trap snapped shut.
40 million. It's a heavy number to process, but that is the upward estimate by historians of the human casualties caused during the empire's expansion. Entire cities were literally leveled, and populations were decimated as the Mongols swept through China, the Middle East, and deep into Eastern Europe. It was a campaign of unprecedented military efficiency, backed entirely by psychological terror. Which brings us to Section 3, Administration and Communication, Controlling the Conquest. Because, let's face it, conquest alone doesn't build an empire. Facing a massive numerical mismatch, the illiterate Genghis Khan had to rely on literate advisors from the lands he conquered. He used them to build his government and construct an administrative framework that could actually last.
And this administrative push was heavily formalized by his third son and successor, Ogedei Khan. Ogedei is often considered the real architect of the empire's infrastructure. He established a formalized tax system, and he even utilized foreign mathematics, like the abacus and the concept of zero, just to track the absolute massive flow of goods and wealth across his expanding realm.
But to hold it all together, they built the yam. They maintained an astonishing 300,000 horses across a vast network of postal stations, all spaced about 20 to 30 miles apart. Arrow messengers would ride in at a full gallop, swap out for a fresh horse at the station, and just keep going. This medieval pony express allowed rapid military and administrative intelligence to flow across Eurasia at speeds the world had literally never seen before.
That flows right into Section 4, Pax Mongolia and Trade, the Eurasian Network. Paradoxically, the extreme brutality of the initial conquests actually birthed the Pax Mongolica. This was an environment of unprecedented stability that completely revitalized the Silk Road and made transcontinental travel incredibly safe for the first time in ages.
The Mongols didn't just passively watch this happen, they actively engineered this economic boom. They relied heavily on the Ortok system, which were basically trade and money-lending partnerships. By capping the liability at the amount of the original investment, it functioned a lot like a modern limited partnership. It drastically reduced the risk for long-distance merchants. Plus, the Mongols officially elevated the societal status of merchants to the highest level, right below government officials. That was a radical departure from neighboring powers like the Chinese, who traditionally ranked merchants just a single step above actual robbers.
They were highly pragmatic about getting the trade flowing. Ogedei Khan, for instance, was famous for literally paying merchants double, sometimes even triple their asking prices. He deliberately took a financial hit just to incentivize global commerce. They even issued special passports. You might have heard of the golden tablet given to Marco Polo. That passport exempted merchants from local taxes and provided them free use of that massive yam postal network we talked about earlier.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, the enduring global legacy, a connected world. The systems built by the Mongols permanently reordered the Eurasian continent, acting as the absolute springboard for the modern era.
Just look at the massive cross-fertilization of technology and culture happening here. Safe travel meant Eastern exports like silk, porcelain, and crucially, gunpowder flowed west. Meanwhile, Western silver, linen, and horses moved east. Muslim doctors were suddenly learning Chinese pharmacology, while Chinese doctors acquired Middle Eastern surgical techniques. It was a completely unparalleled exchange of human knowledge.
However, we absolutely must acknowledge the tragic side effect of this intense connectivity. The very same protected arteries of trade that safely carried silk, paper, and medical manuscripts, they also facilitated the rapid transmission of deadly diseases. The bubonic plague traveled right along these Mongol trade routes, accelerating the spread of the Black Death across Eurasia with absolutely devastating consequences.
So it really makes you wonder, did globalization, exactly as we understand it today, actually begin with the unification of the Central Eurasian steppe? It's a pretty profound thought to end on, isn't it? The Mongols undoubtedly destroyed much, but the interconnected systems they built from those ashes undeniably shaped the world we all live in today. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning.